This is going to be a little bit of a different type of video than my usual stuff. This is not going to be YSL 3. Let's just say that. So if you're a child, because I do know I have some kids that watch me, tune out. You know, I can't force you to do anything, but I promise you this is not going to be like fun. You're not going to be missing anything if you're a kid by skipping over this one. My goal with this, you know, is to provide and present additional evidence and facts about this Chris Cole situation and try to answer some common questions, because I see the same few questions come up all the time when I've been researching this subject. I feel kind of obligated to say something about what is going on, because most larger skate media have avoided the topic pretty much entirely. 9 Club, Thrasher, whatever you're reading or listening to or watching, more than likely they have not covered it. By the way, I'm not really trying to blame anybody exactly for not wanting to touch this. It's not like I was looking forward to doing this either. The story broke in the first half of 2024, and I'm only getting around to making this video now because I feel like there's enough information to say something about it. Not only that, but, you know, hardly any pros have really said anything on this subject either. The only thing I'm aware of is Josh Kalis left a couple of like Instagram comments. Essentially, everybody in the industry seems like they're pretending that this is not happening. There are people out there that are going to be upset or angry that I'm publishing information about this story, you know, because either they think that it violates some privacy, or that they just feel like their, you know, parasocial relationship with Chris Cole is being jeopardized or something, and that's like too emotionally laborious for them to process. So if you are one of those people, you do not have to watch this video. That being said, though, there are 2 people involved with this story, Christine, Chris Cole's ex, and their son, Wyatt. Both of these people that are directly involved want this information to be published. Christine has made that public tens of times at this point, and Wyatt has messaged me directly on Instagram and said, I appreciate the fact that you are going to be sharing this story. I would not be covering this if I did not have permission from the people involved, but more importantly, that it is the direct wish of people involved that I do actually cover this. You know, you have the choice whether or not to watch this video, but your preference on whether or not this information is released is completely irrelevant. I don't think that, you know, this situation thus far has been super clear. I think most people's interpretation of what has happened is it's Chris Cole's word against his ex-wife's word, and, you know, without additional information or details, how can you really be certain? And I think that's a rational point of view. You don't want to condemn or disavow anybody over unsubstantiated claims. Christine has actually provided a decent amount of evidence for her claims, but they're not anywhere that feels like they're super easily accessible. The majority of this stuff is hiding on Slap, and that's a large part of why I'm making this video, to try to make existing information hopefully available to more people. And also I have some new information that I don't think is anywhere really. I think only other point that I really want to make on this before proceeding into some actual details is I'm a YouTuber. This is not a court of law. Obviously, I'm not claiming to know every single facet or aspect of Chris's and Christine's relationship. Nearly every relationship has arguing, cheating, lying, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, you name it. Anyone who has been in a relationship knows that people make mistakes. Nobody is perfect, and I'm not trying to hold Chris Cole to some unattainable moral standard that we would all be unable to meet anyway. I don't think it's helpful to air out personal matters needlessly in an attempt to, you know, destroy someone's reputation. If I thought that's what this was, I absolutely would not be making this video. What Chris Cole is being accused of crosses into a totally different domain. He is being accused of repeated physical violence against his ex-wife. If that's true, that would make Chris Cole a legitimately dangerous person. The availability of that information becomes a matter of public safety. This is one of the most famous skateboarders, one of the most accomplished skateboarders out of anybody in all of skateboarding history. 2 times SOTY. This guy is as big as it gets. She also has alleged that he attempted to kill her. If you are a public figure, your audience has sort of a right to be, aware or apprised of your alleged criminal behavior. So, for example, if I was a huge Chris Cole fan, I had a bunch of, his boards hanging on my wall, and I looked up to him as some kind of role model. If there is information out there that could potentially change my opinion of Chris Cole, I think people have a right to that information, and they have a right to make a decision based off that information for themselves. You don't have to come to any particular conclusion about what I'm going to be telling you. I'm going to be giving you the information and giving you my opinion. It's up to you what you do with that, if you do anything at all. The first thing you're probably wondering, if Chris Cole was violent to his ex-wife, why does Christine not sue Chris Cole? That's the most popular question that I see, and I think we should get that established before proceeding. Here is what Christine told me about that, because this stuff is complicated. There's legal things in motion surrounding this. I'm going to be speaking differently than I usually do in my videos. There's a lot of allegedly this, or it appears as though that, and I'm speaking that way in an attempt to try to protect myself from, getting sued. She says, I kept it out of court for a while in order to salvage Chris's career. It's why I did mediation in divorce instead of a trial, to keep his domestic violence out of court records. I was worried that my kids would suffer financially if his career was ruined because I was still building a career to be able to stand on my own feet. Chris Cole was the main source of income for the household, so if Chris Cole loses sponsors, he might lose money or lose all of his money. That's going to negatively impact everyone in the household. That being said, it is true that you can get the other party to pay your legal fees if you win, but what Christine thinks is going to happen is that Chris Cole will file for bankruptcy and she'll never be able to recoup the costs. All the money Christine has is tied up in her house. She'd have to take out a second mortgage to be able to do that. But she's barely affording, the house right now. She's not rich. She's not financially well off. People are thinking that she's, at doing this for money, or she's a gold digger or something. She works a 9 to 5, and it's quite likely that Whitney Cummings, that's Chris Cole's new girlfriend, is just going to pay his legal fees. So she could be out at least $100,000. Even if Christine wins a criminal case against Chris or successfully defends herself, against a defamation case, it's likely that she will end up losing more than she stands to gain. Lastly, the way the court system works is you have to bring someone to court either by suing them, which is civil court, or if they do something criminal, that's criminal court. When she signed her divorce papers with Chris, she signed away any right to sue him for any civil matter that happened in the duration of their marriage. This happens in every marriage settlement. She cannot sue him in civil court. So the only benefit of suing somebody in civil court would be for money. She does not want money, so that leaves criminal court. She's talked with women's shelters and detectives in her area, and even if there's a slam dunk obvious victory against somebody, it's rarely prosecuted. This case at this point is about 5 years old, so the likelihood of a DA charging Chris 5 years later is quite unlikely. With this explanation, I think if Christine wants any type of recourse or justice whatsoever, taking things public makes some sense. Okay, so this is the first development in this story. Christine makes this post on Instagram. Basically, the idea of this post is that because Christine's name is Christine and Chris's name is Chris, those names are too similar for Chris's liking, so he gave her the nickname Red. Over the course of their, their relationship and their marriage, people in their lives adopt that nickname. She basically became known as Red. She does not want to be called that name anymore because it reminds her of her relationship with Chris. He gave her the nickname, and as we're going to get into, that relationship was less than ideal. She wants to move on from it, so she doesn't want to be called Red anymore. In my opinion, this post accomplishes two things. It informs people in her life about what she alleges happened to her. So, if she's going to be like, hey, I don't want to be called Red anymore, here is why. It also notifies people to update her name. This post did not strike me as hostile or vindictive. I think she made this post for reasons that are clear and understandable. Crucial things that she mentioned here. She says, one day he nearly took my life. We will get into that with some more detail, why she believes that. Also, she says, the violence I dealt with. So she's claiming that Chris Cole almost took her life and that she dealt with violence. So those are two major allegations in this initial Instagram post. She doesn't mention him by name here, but it's quite obvious. Nobody, is under any illusions about who she's talking about. So How does Chris Cole respond to this? He writes, "The accusations of my ex-wife are beyond shocking and categorically false. As hard as it has been to hold off on commenting on the situation, I have kept silence because children are involved, and this is obviously traumatic." So, according to Google, categorically means in a way that's so clear that it's impossible to be confused or uncertain. So, Chris Cole says she made this up. Not only that, he is in shock. He is learning about this for the first time. It's quite unbelievable. He had no knowledge of these alleged events. That's what Chris is saying. Plus, think of the children. Not only does he claim that this is fake news, he also sends a cease and desist. The only reason it's not on screen is because I don't know the legality of that. Christine posts this on Instagram. She says, "I'm being threatened with a lawsuit if I don't take down my post and issue a retraction. I'm not going to do that. Not one thing I said was a lie, and the truth is worse than my post even alluded to." And then she explains all she wanted to do is tell people to update her name and say what happened to her. So you could probably imagine that if you were in Christine's position and you believed you were telling the truth about your situation, this would probably be extremely aggravating. Christine also is under the impression that this was a scare tactic and that Chris did not actually intend to follow through. It seems as though her theory was correct because it's now months and months later. They threatened to sue unless their demands were met. That was take down the post, issue a retraction. She didn't do that, and nothing happened. That would basically make that, textbook definition of an empty threat or a scare tactic. It's one thing to claim on your Instagram story that your ex-wife is lying about her accusations against you. It's a significant or even an extreme escalation to threaten a lawsuit as a bullying tactic. And in my opinion, it's quite bold that Chris would not only categorically deny the claims, but also threaten a lawsuit over this claim when there is evidence like this that exists. This is an abuse letter that appears to be written by Chris Cole. We'll get into the context of this later. But here's what it says. "To whom it may concern, my name is James Cole, and I have a history of domestic abuse. On a handful of occasions, I've been physically abusive to my wife, Christine." So, if this is a real email and he actually wrote this, this is a point-blank confession that he was physically violent. If this email is true and Chris wrote it, it would make perfect sense that he did not want to follow through on a lawsuit because he would be aware that there is evidence to protect Christine against defamation. You might see this screenshot and think, well, this might be fake. And it's true, it's possible that this could be fake, but if Christine did fake this or doctor this letter in some way, she would basically be setting herself up to lose a defamation lawsuit. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense that she would do that, considering her house depends on her not going bankrupt. Not only that, but Christine has also claimed that this letter is notarized. So she is saying this is 100% real and it has been authenticated by a third party. Also, the email that this is sent from, it's censored because if it was uncensored, that would be doxing Chris Cole's personal email, and I'm pretty sure that's illegal. After this, I think Christine is probably a little bit annoyed, and she goes on Robert Brink's YouTube channel and goes into pretty brutal detail about her allegations against Chris. If you want to listen to that, go to Robert Brink's channel. You can find it there. I'm just going to play you a very brief clip where she summarizes what happened to her in a short form video because it's already a very long video. But if you want to hear the full extent of what she's talking about, you can go check out that video. I will put the link to it in the description.
"I was pushed downstairs. My teeth were broken with a beer bottle. I had 100-pound suitcases thrown at me at skate contests. I was choked multiple times to the point of not thinking I would survive. I don't want to be silenced any longer. I was silenced for 15 years. Anytime I reached out for help, I was met with, well, if you say anything, then he won't make any money, and that'll hurt your kids. My kids were used as leverage against me in order to keep me silent."
So I know there's people that just assume that this is all made up and it's coming out of nowhere and it is a reaction to Christine being spiteful, about Chris Cole's new relationship or something like that. I'm going to play you this clip from Weekend Buzz. This is 10 years old where Christine was on the show with Mikey Taylor's wife. And she is talking about an event where, Chris was behaving violently. And at the time, this was treated like it was a joke. But I think, in retrospect, looking at that with all of this new information that has been coming out, you can see this isn't just coming out of the blue. She is not just concocting this for the sake of it. There has been corroborated and known instances of Chris Cole's alleged violent behavior.
Chris wanted to go out and skate, but we had plans, and I was like, well, fuck. And he kind of just sprung it on me. He's like, oh, well, I'm going to go skate. I'm like, well, we had plans, and it was just, if you're going to go skate, like, just be courteous and just say, hey, can I go skate? Like, is that okay with you? And, like, let's figure this out. Like, is there a time that works out? I don't know. Whatever. So I got super pissed, and I was like, oh fuck, I'm leaving. Like you have the kids, and I left and went in the car. Like, you're not skating now. Fuck you, because he wasn't like responding in a way that I thought he should. So I left and went in the car, and I was gonna try and pull out of the garage, but the garage took way too long. So he came in, and he was just like, and smashed the hood of my car, like, as hard as he could. And I had these two huge dents in my green car. And so he says he walks away, and it didn't relieve as much pressure as he wanted it to. So he sees a bike pump, and he just picks it up and just hurls it at the car, and it just shatters the windshield.
So the tone of this video is pretty confusing because everybody seems to be like laughing about it. At the time, because Chris and Christine were still together, this story was kind of told as like, a wacky thing. Weekend Buzz was a comedy program, so there's kind of an overall expectation that the stories on there are going to be funny. But if you listen to what she's actually saying, she's saying, he hurled a bike pump at my windshield. It cracked the windshield. He got so angry that he smashed his fists into the hood of her car. So do not be fooled by, how everybody is reacting to this. I don't think anybody really feels good about how this interaction went 10 years down the line. I think this was a pretty bad representation of how serious this was. Wyatt, who is Chris and Christine's son, posts this to Instagram. He says, this is my mom. She's the kindest, most supportive person I've ever had the privilege of having by my side. Recently, she's gone public to tell her story. What she had to say wasn't easy for anyone to hear. She endured years of emotional and physical abuse at the hands of my dad. He's urging people to believe his mother, and he's also saying he witnessed violence firsthand himself. There have been, some people who don't want this to be true. There have been questions about Wyatt's qualification to speak on the subject, like, oh, well, he's just a kid, he's young, he's suggestible. I think it's important to point out that Wyatt is 18 years old. He is legally an adult, and he is the only person who has spoken up about this thus far that was actually present during these disputes. He's one of the only people that can speak up about this. To me, this gives Christine a ton of credibility and looks extremely bad for Chris. This is a screenshot from a DM. He was talking to, somebody about the situation. I believe this is in response to Wyatt's post. He says, "My kids are being manipulated and used as a weapon. It's the most heartbreak I've ever endured in my life." And then he goes on to say, even all the people who were there knew the relationship and have called me to say they are sorry and this isn't fair. So this is kind of like Trump-style tactics, basically, appealing to all of these people that are apparently in his life that personally called him up and said, we know the truth, Chris. This is so unfair. We're so sorry, but we're not going to speak up because we're so scared. Everyone is scared they will be the next victim. This is an interesting DM because it also shows that Chris Cole actually believes that he is a victim. It's not his ex-wife who is alleging all of this horrible, abuse and violence. It is him. Chris is the one who has been victimized in this situation. Chris claims also his children are being used as weapons. I think it's important to note that having kids involved in this at all is very fucked up. I don't think any child should be put in a scenario where they have to choose between their mom and their dad. And I would not include them in this coverage if I didn't think it was absolutely crucial. Wyatt only had to say anything about this because his dad flat out denied that any of this happened. Think of it from Wyatt's point of view. If you knew that your mother was telling the truth and your dad was lying, it would be extremely difficult not to speak up. The irony here to me is that Chris says his children are being manipulated and used as weapons, where from where I'm sitting, it seems like the only people that are using the children or using them as a shield or a weapon or of any kind is Chris. The only two screenshots I've seen of Chris discussing the allegations, one on his story, one from this Instagram DM. He seems like he's using his kids to protect himself from taking responsibility in both of them. Seems to me that Chris is accusing his ex of exactly the thing that he himself is doing. I thought at first that Chris didn't post anything on his Instagram in response to this post by his son, but he in fact did. He basically reiterates what he said in that DM. He says, weaponizing and involving children is incredibly traumatic and unfair to them. If this was true, it would be handled in a court of law. I will make a statement when it won't further harm my kids. So again, in my opinion, this looks like Chris Cole is using the kids as a shield. I think this point is well supported by Whitney Cummings, that's Chris Cole's new girlfriend, leaving this comment on Brink's Instagram post, because Brink just did another interview with Christine, and Whitney writes, today Christine was court-ordered to stop public blasphemy about Chris and to ask you and others to take all this down because it's traumatizing their 14-year-old daughter. So there you have it, pretty much in plain English, saying that you cannot publicize any information, any of these allegations about Chris because it is negatively affecting the children. They are threatening people by saying posting this could cost her custody of her child and further harm the child. So basically they're setting up a ransom situation where if anybody publicizes the allegations against Chris Cole, they are going to try to get Christine's daughter taken away from her. Those are the depths that these people are willing to stoop to try to make this whole thing go away. If Christine and Chris were really worried about traumatizing a child in the way that they say they were, they would never dream of trying to take away a daughter from their mother. That's fucking insane. They are the ones that are using a kid as a chess piece to try to get out of trouble. If Chris's son came out and defended him, I think it's doubtful that Chris would have an issue with that. If you were really that concerned, the way that he claims to be in this DM, about the well-being of your kids, you wouldn't be putting them in a position where they have to choose a side. You might be saying, well, Christine is the one who forced the kids into getting involved when she came out with these allegations of abuse. Wyatt claims that he saw abuse happen firsthand. He witnessed it himself. So my refutement to that would be, Chris is the one who involved the kids in this from the start by being allegedly violent in front of his children. The blame for the kids' involvement in this starts with Chris, and he has to take responsibility for that. It is not Christine's fault for making this alleged abuse public. By expecting Wyatt to say nothing, Chris is also expecting him to take his side. Silence on this seems to be Chris's goal. That's why he threatened a lawsuit. It seems like Chris's primary goal with this is to salvage his reputation so he can pursue a career in D-list podcasting. I think most people would have a hard time listening to you podcast if they believe that you were a violent person. Christine claims in her initial post that Chris tried to murder her. So we can analyze text messages between them to see why she believes she was at risk of being killed. Christine is in the blue. Chris is in the black. I believe this text on the left here from Chris is saying that was the craziest claim ever. He says, I did not try to kill you. So he's responding to Christine saying that he tried to kill her. He says, I didn't punch or kick you. I'm bigger and stronger than you, so for you to believe I tried to kill you is absolute lunacy. Seems to me that you're building me up as this big monster man in your eyes and not seeing this from a grounded standpoint. Okay. Christine writes, the fact you looked me dead in the eye and said, I'm going to kill you, jumped over the kitchen island, then slammed me into walls back and forth, that's facts, not opinion. Chris responds with this. He says, the fact I said those words is fact. The action of not punching your face or actually attempting to harm you permanently is also fact. Chris admits that he has threatened to kill Christine. Christine writes, quotes, I'm going to kill you. Chris says, the fact I said those words is fact. From her point of view, she's like, this guy told me he's going to kill me. He's also choked me. Christine claims this has happened on more than one occasion. So from her point of view, she thinks this guy who says he's going to kill me and this guy who has choked me, he seems to be pretty serious about this. So this is a little bit more of a subjective interpretation of some of Chris Cole's messages. Christine is accusing Chris of attempting to kill her by way of strangulation. Now, Chris Cole keeps bringing this up. He says, I didn't punch or kick you. This is a weird thing to say in the context of somebody saying, you were choking me. You tried to kill me because you were choking me. Notice Chris is deliberately talking about things he did not do instead of the thing that he is being accused of. So the fact that he's saying, I didn't punch or kick you, in my opinion, reads almost like an implicit admission that he was choking her. Now, even if you think that's a stretch, that he's not implicitly admitting that he was choking her, it appears as though he is implicitly admitting to some level of violence, because Christine says, "You jumped over the kitchen island, then slammed me into walls back and forth. That's facts, not opinion." Chris says, "The fact I said those words is fact. The action of not punching your face or actually attempting to harm you permanently is also fact." So he does not deny that he, at the very least, threw Christine and slammed her into walls. What he says is, "Oh yeah, I did say that I was going to kill you, but I didn't actually try to permanently harm you. I know if somebody accused me of throwing them into walls and I hadn't done it, the first thing that I would say is, I did not do that." There's also this weird segment in here about, you see the damage I pushed through while skating. You have to know I never wanted to harm you in the way you're claiming I did. So there's a bizarre time for Chris to be giving himself, props for being a gnarly zero skater. But there you have it. Things get even worse somehow, where he says, this is, I think, sometime later, he says, "If I tried to take your life, you'd not be alive, Red. Realize I never tried." She responds, "Leave me alone." And then he says, "You're not safe then." After essentially claiming he can easily kill Christine, he says, "You're not safe. How about that?" So he's telling his ex-wife she is a lunatic for thinking he would try and kill her. He is also explaining to her how easily he could do it if he wanted to, and then proceeds to tell her she is not safe. And remember, she's crazy for thinking that, he might actually try to do this. This is not only twisted behavior, it's also extremely stupid. Chris Cole is implicating himself for the thing that he's accused of while simultaneously denying it. If it wasn't enough already, I think that there's been more than enough evidence. But if it wasn't, here is some information about what it means when your significant other is strangling you. In a study of homicide victims killed by an intimate partner, it was found that 43% had experienced a non-fatal strangulation by their partner prior to their murder. In attempted homicides by an intimate partner, 45% of victims had been strangled before the attempted murder. In 1987, it was determined that being strangled by a partner even one time increases a victim's risk of homicide by that perpetrator over 600%. It seems like an extremely rational conclusion to come to based off somebody saying, "I'm going to kill you," and then
allegedly
strangling you, and then also looking at the data about what that means. 45% of victims had been strangled before an attempted murder. So it's almost a broadcast, according to the data anyway. The person strangling you is almost broadcasting like this is going to happen. It's a preview. So enter our newest character, Chris Cole's new girlfriend, comedian Whitney Cummings. When Christine received the cease and desist letter, it came from a celebrity defense lawyer. Christine thought that was odd because, according to her, she had to help Chris get his own divorce attorney. You can see she said that twice here. "It is my belief that his girlfriend set him up with the attorney." She also posted on Instagram, "I had to find him his divorce lawyer, for fuck's sake." Here, Christine is saying that she believes that Whitney is the reason that Chris got hooked up with this powerful legal defense. Lavely and Singer, these are the guys that have represented huge names. Considering that this is the guy that leaves rotten food in the sink, he can't do his dishes, and has black mold growing in his house, I don't think that it's much of a stretch to think that he may be receiving some kind of assistance with his legal representation. You can also think of it like this. Chris gets a celebrity girlfriend, then all of a sudden he has a celebrity defense attorney. You can probably figure that one out for yourself. This partnership of Chris and Whitney is incredibly ironic, given that Whitney was extremely good friends with Chris D'Elia. They've been on each other's podcasts, and he also co-starred on her TV show. Chris D'Elia, a couple years back, got caught asking teenage girls for naked pictures. Yes, like actual teenage girls, like 16, while he had a 1-year-old child. So I'm not going to go into deep detail of what Chris D'Elia was doing, but it's fucking crazy. It's actually crazy. There are hundreds of articles written on it. You can find more information than you could ever possibly want about the situation. When shit hit the fan and all of this became public, this was Whitney Cummings' response. "I'm devastated and enraged by what I've read and learned. This is a pattern of predatory behavior, this abuse of power. is enabled by silence. We're going to have to return to that. Now that I'm aware, I won't be silent. Okay, so this is a heartfelt condemnation. With this in mind, if Whitney did help Chris find this celebrity defense attorney, and it seems likely that she may have done that, Whitney has gone from valiantly condemning alleged abusers to, by her own definition, enabling them. Not only has Whitney not commented on the abuse, she has brought Chris around famous podcast comedians and got him airtime on shows, like Bert Kreischer and Bradley Martin. So yes, she is not only enabling Chris by helping him threaten his ex-wife into silence, but also enabling him by putting him in new professionally advantageous situations. She is giving him new opportunities to try and drown out any noise about what he's been accused of. In my opinion, they're just trying to steamroll their way through this. It seems to me that Whitney is massively assisting Chris in escaping consequence for the alleged abuse. A switch up this extreme of this magnitude calls into question the authenticity of her initial statement on Chris D'Elia. It does not appear as though she cares about alleged victims at all. It appears to me like she caved because the D'Elia story got national news coverage. She didn't have a choice. She made the decision that would protect herself. This Chris Cole story, by comparison, has gotten virtually no attention outside of a Too Lazy to Try video, who is the guy that did the background research, for these tweets in the first place. I think that video came out like 4 or 5 months ago. If she really cared, why is she posting photos of Chris Cole practically every single day, just banal nonsense on her Instagram story?
So, babe never drinks water. Okay. He never drinks water. You can stop closing your eyes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, babe never drinks water. And
That's not true.
You know me, over here always trying to save your life. How about them apples?
Oh my. That's really good. Go Birds.
Go Birds. If that doesn't make you drink water, I just don't know what will. Is that a little dorky though?
No.
It's like a thermos, huh?
Yeah.
Go Birds.
There's been very little pressure for Whitney to virtue signal, on this subject the way she did with the Chris D'Elia situation. I personally have my own theories on Chris and Whitney's relationship, but I'm going to save those for another video that I have planned, a little bit less of a formal video. So, surprisingly, Whitney's involvement in this ordeal actually does not end there. She also attempted to call Wyatt Chris and Christine's son and followed him on Instagram. Christine thought that was quite inappropriate, and that culminated in a phone call between Whitney and Christine. Here are some of the highlights of that exchange.
I am recording this just to be clear.
Okay, why not go to court and leave the children out of this? You know this is child abuse, right?
Whitney accuses Christine of child abuse for involving the children. I believe she's referring to Wyatt, who defended his own mother on Instagram for people who were calling Christine a liar. Wyatt claims he had seen physical violence firsthand. To me, that seems like a more fitting definition of child abuse, that the kids had to be, witness to alleged violence between their parents, rather than Wyatt, a legal adult making a post to Instagram. These alleged violent acts taking place in front of children, in Whitney's mind, do not constitute child abuse, but then telling people after about this alleged abuse, that does count as child abuse.
I'm asking you not to call my children.
Okay, you can keep asking that as much as you want.
That sounds like saying she has no intention of stopping. In my opinion, the correct response to this request would have been, okay, I'll stop. Considering it's fucking weird that she's even trying to do it in the first place, and they also evidently do not want to be contacted by Whitney.
What are your goals for this? What is your plan? You want him to kill himself?
What's your goal with all of this? To get Chris to kill himself? Which is a to me, an alarming statement. Whitney is insinuating that by exposing her ex-husband's alleged violent and abusive behavior, she is actually jeopardizing Chris's safety because he might kill himself. Chris would not have had any concern for Christine's safety when he was allegedly choking or throwing suitcases at her. Why would Christine cover for him? That's completely ridiculous. Nobody would do this in their own personal lives. Nobody would cover for somebody that was allegedly being violent. This is a rudimentary, basic, stupid tactic to try and dodge accountability. You can't get out of responsibility for something you've done by threatening to kill yourself. This is a literal meme in the Internet Hall of Fame.
Bitch think getting pregnant is gonna trap me. Bitch, I will kill myself.
Ironically, Whitney, the comedian, fails to see how ridiculous and funny a statement that is. Whitney literally goes from saying silence enables the pattern of abuse to texting Christine and asking for the situation to be resolved in private. I don't think you can get more hypocritical than that. Whitney also sent text to Christine saying things like they deserve to have a father. I agree with Whitney. However, if it so happened that Chris was not able to see his children, because of what he had been accused of, that blame would fall squarely on Chris. It would not be Christine's fault for holding Chris accountable for the alleged violence. It would be Chris's fault for perpetrating that alleged abuse. There's no getting around that. And if in fact that is not true, then Chris should be suing Christine for defamation. And by the way, I am not advocating, for Chris not being able to see his children as an outcome or a result, but I strongly disagree with Whitney's, interpretation of the situation. We covered Whitney's involvement. Now let's discuss Jason Ellis. A lot of you guys won't know who Jason is. Some of you will. Jason is an ex-pro vert skater. Jason was also a co-host on the Hawk vs. Wolf podcast with Tony Hawk. Some people say co-host. I would say that Jason more or less sabotaged that program. It's important to establish Jason promotes himself as a vulnerable but tough bisexual. Here he is on Instagram wearing a pink t-shirt with an earring talking about how he likes to cry.
I could knock out all those guys, and I cry. I'm gonna cry again probably later today. Oh, don't cry. It shows that you're weak. Fuck off. I'll knock you out and then cry on your face to wake you up.
This is only my personal opinion, but I think Jason Ellis is a social media addicted narcissist. Jason, like most people competing in clout sharking podcast cesspools, will completely suspend any moral values or ethics that they purport to have as soon as it is no longer advantageous for their careers. Jason Ellis had knowledge about Chris Cole's alleged behavior. Christine told his wife in 2022, his ex-wife, because they all used to hang out. Christine gives Katie a summary of her alleged abuse because Christine sees they're still hanging out with Chris and thinks they should probably know. So let's take a look at that. Christine says, hey, I kind of want to open up to you about something. I admire how often you stand up for women. I know you and Jason have a relationship with Chris, and that's actually why I want to let you know what happened. Chris was violent and abusive throughout our marriage. He tried to kill me twice. It made me hit absolute rock bottom. So Katie responds saying, wow, I'm sorry that, you went through that. I truly had no idea, even an inkling of what was going on, how awful. I'm happy to hear you got out of it. Is Wyatt okay? Then she sends more stuff, blah, blah, blah. She talks about how Chris was doing some weird things. He complimented a laser-engraved knife I had on my bag. I told him it's from my buddy's firearm company, and he said he's too sad for guns. With this knowledge, it is extremely likely that Katie, Jason's ex, his wife at the time, probably did, in fact, tell Jason Ellis about what was going on. Here are some texts between Jason Ellis and Christine from April of 2024. This is 2 years later. So Christine sees that Jason is hanging out with Chris and tells him about everything that has happened. I want to let you know I'm not lying about my accusations. She also says, I don't need you to do anything with this information. If you want to keep that kind of energy in your life, that's absolutely your right. But you often speak publicly about being a champion for women, so I thought you should at least hear a woman's side. I wish you the best. Throughout this entire story, Christine is being painted as this psycho vindictive person. All of these text messages read to me as being quite fair, quite reasonable. She's not telling Jason never talk to Chris again whatsoever, but she's saying, it's a little bit ironic that you champion women, as your public personality, and you're still kind of associating yourself, with Chris. You should hear my side of the story. Let's remember, Jason is the LGBTQIA advocate who cries in a pink t-shirt on Instagram. What do you think his reaction to this text message was? He blocks her. No response, just blocked. It gets better. 4 months later, Jason has both Chris and Whitney Cummings on his podcast. So you can see, obviously, where these people's priorities are. It appears to me that Jason makes decisions in the same way a lot of people in his field do. Who he supports and who he keeps in his personal life is based pretty much entirely on Instagram followers. Here's a nice quote from Jason so you can, really get a good gauge about the kind of guy that he claims to be. I've got a tough exterior. I fight MMA. I'm a skateboarder. I'm tattooed from head to toe. But if you get to know me, you know I'm a sensitive man. And the rejection of me being a bisexual man by other LGBTQ people hurts. Oh, world's smallest violin for Jason Ellis. It is so hard being a bisexual guy, Jason, isn't it? We all feel so sorry for you. By the way, I do not have the expectation that Jason or any of Chris's friends need to abandon him or treat him like he is subhuman. Chris is a person. He also needs support. He appears to be, to me, extremely fucked up. However, there is a massive difference between that and pretending like nothing is happening by blocking Christine and then having him on your show to sit around and pretend like nothing is wrong. As awful as this situation seems to be, to me, it really puts things into perspective. This has given people an opportunity to show their true colors, and boy, have they. Okay, last major thing that we need to talk about, and this is Chris's, from my understanding, because Chris has said virtually nothing about this, Chris Cole's main defense against these allegations is one specific event where Christine was arrested in a dispute between the two of them. When Whitney Cummings was texting Christine, she sent the photo of the scratch over Chris's eye. It's clear that Chris is telling people around him that he, the guy who could have easily killed Christine, is actually the victim of violence. So, the only photo I was able to find of these two together is them standing right next to each other. Christine is wearing heels, so I roughly subtracted what I thought the height of the heels to be. So this is roughly the actual height disparity of the two of them. Chris has a significant and obvious physical advantage over Christine. He said so himself. This is Christine's version of events, and I'm going to summarize this, put it shortly, because this is, out of everything I've read and heard, this is easily the most fucked up part of any of this. So Christine is suicidal. Chris calls the police. That escalated into a physical fight where Christine claims she was choked and had her head slammed into the ground. She's pinned down, being choked. To defend herself, she reaches up and scratches Chris's face. Christine says she then fled to the yard after this, and the cops showed up right after. Chris speaks to the police, and he tells them Christine was suicidal. They see the scratch on his face, and they bring her in for her own safety. The police end up releasing Christine and dropping any charges. There are also medical records documenting her injuries that she sustained in the altercation. That's here. Domestic concerns, hurt by somebody in the home. This is the situation that sparked Chris Cole to write this abuse letter, which, again, Christine claims is completely authentic and validated by a third party. She says this letter is notarized. Apparently, what Chris Cole is telling people, and this is coming from Christine, who apparently heard this from Wyatt, their son, Christine was running around with a knife. So it's difficult to be certain of what transpired, though looking at the injuries sustained by both parties, Chris is significantly taller and stronger than Christine. What makes sense to you? That Christine had a knife, I guess, scratched Chris in the face with it? Someone who has, the height advantage that he does. She didn't nick him on the hands. He didn't, I guess, try to defend himself. So my question is, where are Chris's defensive wounds if he were attacked by somebody wielding a knife? Or does it make more sense to you that if he pinned her down on the ground and their faces were right next to each other, that she reached up and scratched him in an attempt to defend herself? And from my understanding, targeting the eyes of your attacker is an extremely common self-defense technique. I looked up, how do you defend yourself from somebody choking you? And this is, I guess, resource for like officers in correctional facilities. Number one result is biting whatever is in front of your mouth. And then the number two suggestion is putting your fingers into the inmate's eyes or, the person that is choking you. So the other thing that I thought was odd about this, and I asked Christine about this, I said, you can see all of these photos of the bruising that she sustained fighting with each other. These are 1 day after the incident. These are 1 month after the incident. So this is not nothing. Like, these are serious bruises. I thought it was odd. I was like, well, you provided all these photos of the bruising. Why are there not photos of, the damage that you sustained when around your neck when he was choking you? I Googled it. Is it obvious when somebody is choked, or does it leave marks when, somebody is strangled? And this is what I found. There may be absolutely no outward physical sign of the strangulation. Approximately 50% of documented cases exhibit no visible injury. An additional 35% have injuries that are too minor to photograph. Therefore, the absence of physical signs of strangulation does not exclude the event. So Christine says, there was, some marking on her neck, but, she had to go to the hospital, and then she had to go to the correctional facility where, ultimately the case was dropped. It was, and she never, I guess, made it out of the waiting room. But by the time she got home, she said there wasn't really anything to take a photograph of. So, to me, that was the biggest hole in her story. Her version of events lines up with, something like this. It said, half the time where somebody is strangled, it doesn't leave a serious physical mark. Chris has a tiny cut on his face. Christine has significant bruising all over her body. It's also, I think, important to mention that Christine has not altered her story about this. These are screenshots where she told a coworker about the event merely days after it happened. She's on record now publicly telling the same exact story years later. Oftentimes, if someone is lying about their story, minor things will change because, there are going to be details that have come up that they did not initially account for, with their first version. Christine has evidently remained consistent about things.
Christine says this is the event that made her actually leave Chris. So she explains that with Robert Brink.
While I was there, a doctor spoke to me and she was, asked me to tell her the story. And she said, I'm going to tell you something that is going to be really hard for you to hear. You're in an abusive relationship and you need to get out of that relationship or he's going to kill you. She said, it's up to you now. You have to do it. We're going to give you some resources, but you have to get yourself out of this situation. And then I did. She gave me information for this place called One Safe Place that's like nearby, and it's just a domestic violence resource center for women. And that was really helpful. And then a few months later, I was able to secure an apartment and move out. So that was the actual end of what I had been dealing with.
At this point, I think it's a fair question to ask. Why Christine did not report the abuse or go to the police earlier. Her explanation for this is that Chris would tell her not to do that because it would negatively affect the children. Because Chris Cole is the primary source of income for their household. So if he stops making money or he's making less money, that would financially affect everyone in the family. This also aligns with Chris's current statements around the alleged abuse, where, as I pointed out earlier, every time I can find that Chris has discussed this, he has brought up his children. He keeps mentioning his children over and over again. Right now, what do we have? Okay, Chris basically is asking you to take his word that he is innocent, while Christine has supplied a significant amount of evidence against him. In my opinion, there's no question who I believe at this time. I think the people who still blindly believe Chris Cole with no evidence are probably doing so for political reasons. Chris's innocence aligns with views a lot of people hold about general trends and ideas, war on masculinity, cancel culture. It suits or reinforces their worldview to believe that there is a coordinated conspiracy to defame Chris Cole. Without looking into it, most people are going to default to taking the side that aligns, again, with their pre-existing worldview. This applies to people that automatically believed Chris and applies to people who automatically believed Christine as well. In my opinion, it is extremely difficult to maintain that stance of supporting Chris Cole after examining this evidence. You would essentially have to be in complete denial about this to blindly accept Chris Cole's version of events. Personal observation about this, I have a ton of respect for Christine. This is an unbelievably difficult situation that she has documented and organized with so much information and scrutinizing detail. She has annotations and notes for almost everything. And by the way, there is tons of stuff I have not even gotten into in this video. Like, there are worse things I'm not even talking about because I'm trying to give you guys the most evidence-based version of events that I possibly can. I think people are desperately looking for ways to undermine and discredit her or look for some ulterior motive, but as far as I can see, none of that exists. You have to make massive assumptions to believe that she's doing this for any other reason outside of what she has publicly stated on Instagram. It seems like the only thing she is interested in doing is getting the story straight. Also, she has not even gone after anyone who is still in contact or supporting him. Like you can see when she texted Jason Ellis, she said, if you want to keep Chris Cole in your life, that's your decision, but you should make that decision with this additional information. Not only that, but the only people who are threatening anything in this situation are the people looking to protect Chris Cole. Chris Cole is doing what a lot of other people do when they're called out for their alleged actions and they play victim. You know, like Chris Cole said in those screenshots, people are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of being victims. Victims of what? Exactly. That's what I want to know. In my opinion, Chris does not appear to be a victim. He is using the concept of cancellation in his defense, hoping that if he can gesture to some larger social movement, that will protect him from accountability. Chris has not provided any counter evidence to what Christine has made public. All he has done is try to make it go away. It's hard to believe that there is so much documented evidence of Chris's alleged behavior, and he still plays victim while trying to sue his ex into being quiet. In my opinion, with all the abuse she has allegedly endured, it's actually miraculous she is not behaving more aggressively. This does not seem like Christine is after revenge. I think she wants to set the record straight. In conclusion, what are we supposed to do with this information? I don't think Chris Cole's life should be over. I don't think everyone in his life should abandon him and leave him out to dry with no support. If Chris expects people to listen to him podcast, the least he can do is properly address or refute the claims made against him. I'm open to changing my opinion on this matter, but it would take Chris substantiating his innocence in the same way that Christine has substantiated the claims of violence. So far, nothing of the sort has happened on Chris's end. You know, there are emails and text messages of Chris admitting he has been violent. Also, Wyatt, their son, has corroborated his mother's claims. I'm inclined to believe that the person trying to make this go away and sending empty legal threats may have something to hide versus the person fighting to distribute information. So, you know, if Chris is innocent and he's able to prove that, it's not impossible, but that would be more impressive than 360 flipping Wallenberg.